Howdy everyone. So recently it has come to my attention, thanks to my viewers, that a certain YouTuber named Connor Murphy has been promoting a hair loss device called iRestore. Now, I don't watch Connor Murphy's channel and I don't care about what he does. The only thing I heard about him is that he's notable as being someone who, despite looking pretty good, basically the opposite of Jason Blaha, he has such a horrendous personality and is so socially inept that he has to pay women on the street to pretend to be interested in him so he can get YouTube clicks. Now, I imagine this guy doesn't let moral scruples get in the way between him and financial gain, so it's no surprise that because of his large subscriber base, the company behind iRestore is using him as a paid spokesperson for this product. Now, honestly, I don't care what Connor Murphy's motivations are, whether he be driven by fame or money, and I don't want to go over the video itself where he promotes the product because it's extremely cringeworthy, so I'd rather just like to take a look at the device itself and examine the science behind it and see if there's any actual evidence to back up the claims made by the manufacturers. So, first of all, what is the iRestore? The iRestore is a helmet someone wears that uses low-level laser light technology to stimulate hair growth in both men and women without the use of any pharmaceuticals. There have been a lot of products like this on the market. There have been laser combs, laser caps, and clinics that offer low-level laser light therapy for their clients. I went to one in the early 2000s, spent thousands of dollars, and didn't do anything for me even after several months. And what is supposed to make the iRestore so special is that it offers better coverage than competing devices, and it's also hands-free, so it provides better mobility than competing devices, which have to be plugged in. And there are two versions of this product on sale at their website. The first one is the iRestore Essential, which isn't much different from existing laser caps on the market, and it costs about $700 US. And the second one is the iRestore Professional, which has more coverage due to having substantially more lasers and LEDs. It has 282 compared to the 51, I should say, from the iRestore Essential, and is advertised as being able to treat more severe forms of hair loss than the base Essential model. It's also a lot more expensive. It's nearly double the price at $1,200 US, and this doesn't cover the shipping costs. So you're going to be spending quite a lot of money on whatever device, whichever one of these devices you buy. So what would make people confident enough in this product to deem it a worthwhile investment, I wonder? Well, first of all, they do have a 12-month return policy, and I'll get to that later in the video, but they also claim their product is FDA cleared and is clinically proven to promote hair growth. So, what does it mean when a product is FDA cleared? This does not mean that it is FDA approved. FDA cleared is not the same thing as FDA approved. I think it's very important that I stress that, because when a product is FDA approved, what that means is that the FDA has determined that the benefits outweigh the risk, and this is nuanced, but what this means is that if a drug or treatment has more dangerous side effects, then the benefits must be good enough to justify the risk. So the FDA doesn't determine this by conducting its own clinical trials or anything, but rather they will review independent clinical testing, which is often conducted by the manufacturer of the product themselves, who are seeking FDA approval. So even though the FDA doesn't actually conduct the testing themselves, they are the ones who set the standards, and the standards that the FDA set are extremely high. It's the highest in the world, in fact, and the clinical trials will often cost tens of millions of dollars, and they'll take several years or even over a decade before a drug actually finishes clinical trials, because a drug seeking FDA approval needs to go through several phases of clinical testing before it actually is FDA approved. So, going over those phases, before any of the phases even begin, there needs to be animal trials conducted, which of course makes me sad because I'm a vegan, but that's just explaining the fact about how a drug or a treatment will begin FDA approval. Now, after the animal tests have been conducted, the drug or treatment moves into phase 1, which will consist of a small number of people, maybe just 10 participants, who are either healthy or ill patients, depending on the type of drug or treatment they're testing. And during this phase, the researchers will try to establish safety and dosing parameters. But during phase 2, that's when the number of participants will increase to several hundred to see if it's effective and safe across a wider spectrum of people amongst more diverse groups. So if the results of phase 2 show that the new drug or device is just as good or better than existing therapies, then phase 3 can begin. Now, during phase 3, we will have an even larger group of subjects, sometimes over 1,000 people, which will include double-blind placebo control tests. So there will be large groups of people receiving placebo to compare to how well they respond to the group receiving the new therapy that's being tested. And there's also a phase 4 trial, but this is this is used just to assess the safety of a drug or treatment after FDA approval. And the reason why they need this is because there have been drugs and treatments on the market that have been withdrawn after hitting the market. And one of the more famous ones would be Vioxx, which was a drug designed to treat arthritis, but was eventually withdrawn due to a phase 4 trial that showed an increase of cardiovascular health problems. So it was on the market and then withdrawn because the phase 4 stuff begins after it actually gets the FDA approval. So the process of getting a drug FDA approved is extremely vigorous, and thus being FDA approved is kind of seen as a big merit in the industry, which very few hair loss treatments have ever earned. In fact, to date, there have only been 2 treatments for hair loss that have earned FDA approval, and those, of course, would be minoxidil and finasteride. So why does the iRestore market itself as being FDA cleared, you have to wonder? Well, the first reason seems pretty obvious. It's because most people probably don't know the difference between FDA approved and FDA cleared, and they're using consumer ignorance to put a prestigious sounding label on their product to give it the veneer of legitimacy. So how does a product get FDA cleared then? And does it mean anything? Well, first, a product, whether it be a drug or a treatment of any sort, in order to be FDA cleared, has to have the manufacturer of the product submit what's called an F10K to the FDA, which is a form that shows that the device is similar to a previous predicate. Now, a predicate is a device that has already been on the market for the same use, which may seem like it's good enough, but the problem, however, is that the predicate could be based on a treatment grounded in poor science due to the lack of testing quality back then, and get FDA cleared even if there's not very much data supporting its use. So for example, the iRestore's predicate is based on something called the iGrow2 growth system, which is basically the same thing. It's another like laser treatment, and that in turn may have been based on some other product which happened to be on the market, and it could result in an eventual regression to a period of time before the FDA even regulated the products by the standards we use today. So in other words, the bar is set very low for FDA clearance as opposed to FDA approval. So basically all you have to do if you want something FDA cleared is you have to show it's similar to something that has been already on the market, even if the product was on the market during the medical dark ages when we didn't have the same tools and resources for quality testing that we have today. So in layman's term, the FDA clearance really doesn't mean shit. However, to be fair, just because something isn't FDA approved doesn't mean it doesn't work. A lot of times a drug can have strong clinical evidence to back its efficacy and still be prescribed off-label for hair loss. Dutasteride is an example of this, as it's an FDA approved drug for benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH, but it is commonly prescribed off-label by doctors for hair loss since there is strong clinical evidence suggesting that it does work for this. So in addition to marketing itself as FDA cleared, which we already established doesn't mean squat, the iRestore also claims strong clinical evidence for its product. However, for a company that is so proud of its clinical data, I have yet to see any evidence at all that this study has ever been published in any scientific journal, which really brings into question their degree of confidence in their own research. So on the iRestore website, if you go there, they claim that in a clinical trial they conducted, 100% of all participants in the trial reported success after 16 weeks. Now, if we search for this trial on the website, clinicaltrials.gov, we can indeed see that the company did actually conduct a double-blind placebo control trial. It was from National Taiwan University Hospital, and they had planned to enroll originally 100 participants divided into 2 groups, with one using the iRestore device while the other group used a placebo mock-up helmet that looked the same. Now, the study was supposed to be conducted over a period of 24 weeks, and none of the participants were on existing FDA-approved treatments like minoxidil and finasteride for hair loss. Now, according to the website, clinicaltrials.gov, the study results were never actually published in any medical journal, which is really confusing. So what that means is that the only take we have on this study comes from the iRestore website itself. There have been no third-party or scientific review of any of this data. We are basically just taking the company word for it. Now, contrast that with something like finasteride that is FDA approved. All the data from multiple peer-reviewed websites is readily available. You can look it up online. I mean, anybody can find it. Now, the iRestore and other similar laser treatments will never be FDA approved because the manufacturers do not even have the confidence to publish their own data and subject it to third-party review. And that's important, I mean, because data review is very, very important. I mean, even published data, when it's reviewed by others, can lead to scientific studies being withdrawn, as we have seen recently in the news after a certain president promoted a certain treatment for a certain disease. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I just don't want my video to be demonetized, so I'm not going to mention it. But So, with all that in mind, we need to have a skeptical attitude when looking at unpublished data from the company's website. Since the data is not published, they can interpret it in the best light for them, when it's very possible the treatment doesn't do anything at all. So, according to the information on the website, there were only 40 patients enrolled, not 100 as originally planned, and the follow up was only 16 weeks, not 24 weeks as originally planned. So, this raises concern that they maybe have cherry picked the data and follow up time to maximize the apparent effect of their treatment. They claim on the website that 100% of participants experienced a roughly 43% increase in hair growth after 16 weeks compared to 5% hair growth with placebo. But on the fine print on their graph, it states that the numbers are rounded and the statistics are not exact, whatever that means. Also, by the standards of their testing, do we really even know if 43% is actually that good? So let me give an example. Say you start with 10 hairs per square centimeter. A 43% increase would be 14 hairs. That is just 4 new hairs per square centimeter. And that could be due just to an anagen growth phase that we naturally experience in our lives. So what we really want to know to see how effective a hair loss treatment is, or a growth stimulant is the absolute number of new hairs per square centimeter, which is what is reported in studies of actual FDA-approved drugs like finasteride and minoxidil. They cause far more than a hair growth of 4 new hairs. So, what is it we do have to back up this product's claims? We have one small study sponsored by the company that appears to show results but lacks any statistics, and it has never been published even after 3 years. It makes you wonder why. Is it because they have skewed the data in their favor and they are afraid the full results would show the flaws in their study? Considering they want you to spend $1,200 on their device, I'd imagine the answer is probably yes. So skewing data is a very common tactic for companies, and I'll post a link on that below. But what about the return policy? If the company weren't confident in their product, would they really be okay with including a 12-month return policy based on customer satisfaction? Well, this return policy may seem very appealing, but unfortunately the whole policy is pretty meaningless because let's look at it this way. Given the fact that you're putting this advanced-looking technological gizmo on your head, you're going to get a strong placebo effect, especially if you're not well scientifically versed and convinced by the data on their website. So people who use it will think it's working just by the strong impression it gives them. So a good analogy to this would be sham surgeries, where people have been shown to feel better just by having anesthesia and an incision made without any actual kind of surgery performed. So, for example, there's a kind of heart bypass surgery called internal mammary ligation that was supposed to improve blood flow to the heart, and I think it was first practiced in the 1930s. And it was used for many years to treat angina pains, which are heart pains, and it was thought to be really effective. However, when they finally did a trial comparing it to sham surgery, the sham surgery was found to be just as good. And this shows just how strong the power of suggestion is at triggering the placebo effect. The iRestore company can afford to sell their bullshit product because they know the customers will be convinced it's working for them, even when it's not, thanks to the power of suggestion that I mentioned. So, I think if we're to take any important message away from this scam product and the people who promote them, it is to be skeptical and learn to interpret data, lest you fall prey to grifters and snake oil salesmen who are trying to take advantage of your desire to save your hair, only to leave you with nothing but an empty bank account and a receded hairline. You know, this is debatable, but I think hair loss is possibly the biggest scam industry that has ever existed. And what con artists and charlatans have learned over the years and centuries is that they can use half-baked research such as what we see in the iRestore website, and they can use it to convince people it's a legitimate product. Another thing they have learned is that they can use popular, pretty faces like Connor Murphy, who have large social media followings and little regard for business ethics, and use them for marketing their garbage to the masses, since they know that these people have a loyal fan base that trusts them enough to take their word and not show any skepticism. So, on that note, I think Connor Murphy should really be ashamed of himself for prostituting himself out to this unethical scam company for money. I mean, hair loss is a mentally debilitating condition that can absolutely wreak havoc on one's confidence and just destroy their very identity. And by promoting this product, it's very possible many of his followers who are fighting hair loss will end up wasting thousands of dollars on this piece of junk product only to find out it doesn't work, and they'll end up losing their hair. And it's a huge shame claim, especially since we already have effective treatments on the market like finasteride and minoxidil, which are clinically proven to work and backed up by very good research. I can spend $10 on a 4-month supply of finasteride and $20 on a 3-month supply of minoxidil, and I can know in confidence that it will work as it has worked for me for over 10 years now. So don't waste your time and money on an unproven, overpriced gimmick when your hair itself is at risk, because you got to remember, time is of the essence, and what you lose, you may not be able to get back, even with pharmaceuticals. So it's important that your time and money isn't wasted on things that don't work. And I know there are going to be people who claim it worked for them, and I can understand, because if I spent $1,200 on a piece of trash, I'd want to convince myself it worked too. But anecdotes don't hold a candle to quality research in the information hierarchy. Otherwise, I could just as easily claim that I know someone who cured their hair loss by rubbing Jason Blaha's butt cheese on their scalp. So if you happen to already own this trash, do what you can to get a return, get your money back, ask a doctor about a prescription for finasteride, and maybe save the extra money down the road for a hair transplant if you need it. So with that said, that's all I wanted to say about that. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.